Watched your film, and I've got to say it is absolutely fantastic. So congratulations.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It means a lot.
So, mate, tell us a little bit about where this idea came about for this film, because it is such a unique idea for a movie.
Mhm. Well, it's a combination of things, really. I love 90s kind of crime heist flicks, as you can probably tell from the film. I love westerns as well. Um, and also, I think there's an undercurrent in the film of, there's political and social messages as well, which I've kind of had all my life. And I feel like this film is fun. I mean, the premise itself I think is kind of unique. It's, a heist that's gone wrong where the robber has to get out of the bank, which I feel I've not seen very often. I think, you've seen the odd hostage film here and there, but I think this specific film is more about how he gets out of this bank. And then, yeah, I think my love for 90s films, and you can probably tell the influences of my favourite directors and writers in the film as well.
I was going to ask that a little bit later on, but I'll ask it now because one of the things we love to do on this show is educate our audience, especially our younger audience. What were some of those movies that you grew up watching in the 90s that you loved?
Sure. So I think first and foremost, I think my film education started in the 70s. I love Dog Day Afternoon, which, this film is heavily influenced by Dog Day Afternoon from the 70s. And then in the 90s, you had a various number of films like, Heat. You had Jackie Brown, you've got Reservoir Dogs, you've got, a lower, kind of a lesser known heist flicks as well, like this Mad City. And yeah, so my influences really stem from that kind of 90s era where heist films and quick snap dialogue and characters who are kind of, they're not likable, they're not likable always, but through their unlikability, you kind of like them. So that's kind of where all my characters come from as well.
Is that a good challenge for you as a writer, trying to make a character that should be unlikable or should be the villain in another movie likable to the audience? Do you find that as a good challenge as a screenwriter?
I'm actually compelled. I don't even find it a challenge. I find it just natural to me. I don't know why that is. I have to probably see a psychiatrist to work out why that is. But I feel like characters or anti-heroes really appeal to, I think they actually appeal to everyone. If you look at like The Dark Knight, everyone loves the Joker. Look at Breaking Bad, everyone loves Walter White. So I feel like if you get that character right, you are providing yourself with a really strong platform to work from. So for me, it's just a natural thing to create characters that have conflicts and have these core wounds that make them do things that are deemed immoral, and then seeing if you can bring that character from that place of darkness into maybe not totally back into the light, but maybe on the pathway towards the light.
Definitely. I can remember when I was at film school, I remember I took Swordfish into a class one day.
Yeah.
And I said to people, I dare you to watch this movie and to dislike the villain, because you can't dislike that character.
You can't. It's John Travolta, isn't it?
It is, yeah, up against Hugh Jackman. And and he gives that powerful speech at the start of the movie where he actually talks about Dog Day Afternoon. And it's like, and I remember they said when they shot that movie, they actually changed the ending because they realized that people were actually going to be barracking for him, even though he was supposed to be the villain. Was that something that you were aware of with your film, that there would be people barracking for a character that should be unlikable?
I feel like, do you know what? If we can relate this to real life, I feel like if you're around someone long enough, whether you like them or, well, maybe not if you dislike them totally, but if they have flaws, you are going to form an emotional bond with this person. So I feel like, the film is 2 hours long, and I feel like you're watching this character go through this journey, and you see his backstory, and you see his potential future and how he was as a kid as well. And I feel like you just automatically, if you have a heart, will kind of just kind of feel for this character, no matter what they do. And I think you will want them to achieve their goal. And sometimes the goal they want to achieve is not actually the goal that's going to help them. Sometimes what happens to them at the end of the film is actually for the betterment of them.
Yeah.
And I think it allows you, as a human being, to put yourself in their shoes if they have huge flaws and if they are a bit villainous, because everyone loves a villainous character. You mentioned John Travolta's character. I actually only remember his character, though I don't really remember Hugh Jackman's character. I just remember Hugh Jackman's character.
Exactly, yeah.
So,
yeah.
I agree. I completely agree with you.
How difficult was it to cast? Because, like you said, this is a character that you were very close to. How difficult was that? How difficult was he as a character to cast? And did you have an actor in mind when you were actually writing the part?
No, so I never write a character with an actor in mind. I try to stay away from that. I feel like you really leave yourself down a narrow pathway. It kind of forms your characters beforehand. I love creating open characters where an actor can come in and just make little tweaks, and because even when I cast the actor, he wanted to make these little tweaks, and I was like, I'm not too sure. But then when he did them, I was like, actually, that's really good. So I feel like if I wrote something with someone in mind, that wouldn't be the case. And it was actually really difficult. He was the most difficult character to cast. He was the lead character, and he really is our springboard for the emotional journey that we have to go on. And I felt like it had to be someone who came across as kind of powerful, but also very vulnerable. And to find actors who have that emotional depth is extremely hard.
When you were doing research for this film, did you do any research into heists that have gone wrong? Because we've had some heists here in Australia that have gone wrong in really, really bad ways, from one that actually featured in the movie Two Hands with Heath Ledger, where a guy jumped over the counter and knocked himself out. We had that happen here. We had another guy that he's gone down in history in Australia as the dumbest criminal of all time. He went into a bank, he robbed it, and thought that all of the doors had locked, but really he was trying to push a door that he had to pull. And he ended up just going and sitting in the corner and waiting for the police to turn up. But he could have left at any time. But do you do that kind of research to find out about heists that have gone horribly wrong when you were writing the script?
I didn't for this film. I didn't do any research on heists that had gone wrong. And the reason why is because I always feel like if you're working within the constructs of reality, and I think because it's a confined film and it's it's a bottle film and they're in one location mainly for the whole film, I feel like that wasn't as important as the overall story, which is basically this character. He's surrounded by police officers and he needs to get out the front door, and that's the only way out. So I didn't really do any research in that sense. I've done a lot of research on how banks look and the outlook of banks and the structure of banks and stuff like that. And then also, I guess my education comes from watching loads of heist films and seeing exactly how they go wrong and right. And I haven't actually seen Two Hands, but I've always wanted to. But I did hear about that criminal who couldn't get out of the bank. I've actually heard about that as well. So yeah, I guess everything that you kind of learn over time kind of subconsciously gets into your head, and it becomes part of your writing process as well.
Yeah. If you ever want to go down a rabbit burrow, Google dumb criminals in Australia. We've had some brilliant ones. We had another guy who decided to rob a bank on his lunch break in the same shopping mall that he worked in, and he actually left his name tag on from the shop that he worked in. So
oh my god.
Yeah.
What's going on? What are you guys doing over there? Why is that happening?
It's just the convict thing from 200 years ago. We've just never learnt. So
it's an English thing, isn't it? It's dumb English people.
Yeah, I think an Australian comedian said once, you've got to stop and remember that Australia came from convict settlement where basically they were guys that got caught. So
yeah, exactly.
So true. So Marcus, tell us a little bit about the shoot itself, because that would have been interesting as well, with the way that this film is shot.
Yeah, absolutely. So we shot it during lockdown, the second lockdown in the UK last year, so everywhere was closed. And I actually started writing it when we just came out of the first lockdown, and I thought, great, we can now film because everything's open. And then I think it was 2 weeks before we were about to film, second lockdown happened, and I was like, okay, that's going to be problematic. In the end, it actually worked out okay, apart from the fact you have to kind of change the way you shoot things. So, you can't have certain people in the room at the same time, and you have to have a COVID person on set, and you need to do COVID tests and so forth. And that was definitely a logistical nightmare at times, but it actually also opened some doors for us, because a lot of places were shut, so it meant we could shoot in locations for a very low budget. And this is not a Hollywood feature film, so having locations at your disposal for a very low budget was extremely helpful on this project. So actually, in that sense, it worked out really well. Logistically, I would say never shoot during the pandemic, but in the end, I think I'm happy with the results, and I think that hopefully the audience are happy as well.
What were some of the logistical things that were a nightmare filming during the pandemic? Because I've got a funny feeling that some filmmakers are going to have to go through that again. I just spoke to someone before in Germany, and he was talking about them going back into lockdown. So what were some of the issues that you found filming during a pandemic?
Well, there was an issue where our second lead actress, Jennifer Lee Moon, she got ill on the day of a shoot. So we were literally a few hours away from shooting, and she was like, "I'm actually ill," and I was dreading the worst, because she actually had COVID, and that would have meant that we have to postpone for two more weeks. Thankfully, it wasn't COVID, and we managed to shoot that scene another day. We shot something else on that day instead. And then there were situations where the camera assistant, he got COVID, and he actually went on another film, and someone on that film had COVID, so he assumed he had COVID, and then we assumed we had COVID. So we were kind of deliberating whether to keep shooting or not, and then we found out we didn't have COVID, which obviously helped us immensely, because when you book out a location for shooting, typically speaking, that you pay for it up front, and they're not going to give you that money back, so you would lose that money. So COVID was definitely a huge factor, and just in general, the mood. You've just come out of a lockdown where everyone didn't know if you're going to come out of the lockdown. The mood was kind of it was very ambiguous. No one knew what was going to happen, and it made things tricky at times, but I feel like everyone done a great job and we got through it.
Well, now the film is completed and you've got a distribution deal. How do you feel now that the film is about to come out to the public? Are you nervous or are you excited?
Oh, yeah, no, I was definitely excited when I made the deal. I was over the moon, ecstatic. And then now we're getting closer to the release date. I'm definitely getting nervous, because it's definitely a film that, because of the political... I don't think the film actually says anything. It just shows you the issues that are happening in the world, and doesn't say what his opinion on those things are. So I'm not too worried about that. But I just, when anyone's releasing a film, you're always worried about how it's going to be perceived by the audience. And, some people are going to love it, some people are going to hate it. You just kind of have to find the positives from that and use them to springboard towards your next project, and make sure they don't kind of knock you off your path. And I feel like, I've always wanted to be a filmmaker, and I feel like if I let people who don't like the film knock me off the path, then I'm not doing any service to myself or to the people that do like the film.
Definitely. Well, I don't think you've got anything to worry about. I know that I liked it, and my co-host who watched it with me loved it as well, so I don't think you've got anything to worry about. But to finish off, what would you like to say to everybody out there before they sit down to watch this brilliant film?
I would say, sit down, watch it with an open mind. It is low budget. It hasn't got Robert Downey Jr. or Denzel Washington in it. So kind of take that as an advantage. You don't know the actors, so you can actually believe they are the characters. And I would say go along the journey. Have fun. It's there to entertain. And any sort of messages that are there, or any sort of things that's highlighting, are there to kind of open your eyes, but at the same time, there's a fun heist story in there, which I want you to embrace and enjoy.
Definitely. Well, Marco,